Hey there, it's André here again with another interview with the Impulsive Thinker podcast for the high achieving ADHD entrepreneur. Today's episode is brought to you by CADAC, the Center of ADHD Awareness Canada. Today I have again Dan Sullivan from Strategic Coach. He's the co-founder of Strategic Coach. He's been coaching for 40 plus years experience, coaching highly successful entrepreneurs with his programs. And he's also author of over 30 publications. We did have Dan on a few weeks ago to talk about the gap in gain. Thanks again, Dan, for talking to us again.
My pleasure.
I think what we want to do differently here is I want to talk about about your past. So in 1988, you formed Strategic Coach with Babs Smith, your partner, in life and business, as you like to call it or say it. But you started coaching in 1974, am I correct?
That's right. Yeah. August.
In August. So, and that was more one-on-one coaching and
strategic. I just had a sense about the world that it was going more entrepreneurial because the microchip was starting to have an impact on business, and the big sign of that was the personal computer, which I think dates from 78, first personal computers. And I just felt that entrepreneurs now were going to be provided with all sorts of capability to have, power or impact that used to require very large bureaucratic organizations. And, I think by instinct, I'm kind of a coach. I really, really enjoy helping other people clarify their thinking about what they're going to do, get clear about their goals, zero in on the activities that are most profitable and productive for them. And this carries over after a certain point, when we were coaching, I went back and I talked to my mother and I told her what Babs and I were doing, and she says, well, you were doing that when you were a child. You were asking people questions about what they were doing and everything. So I think that, there's a certain, factory made, installed right from the installed in the factory, on the factory floor. I think that I love listening to people talk about their experience and then ask them questions about their experience,
Yeah, and you definitely ask great questions. Yeah. So you've been diagnosed with ADHD later in life.
ADD, not ADHD.
Non-hyperactive. Yeah.
I don't have to run around. I can be confused sitting in one spot.
ADD, but later on in life.
66. I was 66.
You were 66. Wow. So when you started coaching 1974 one-on-one, before you started Strategic Coach, did you, now looking back at what you know now, how was your undiagnosed ADD affecting your work, and also how was it supporting your work?
Well, until I got medicated properly for it, I didn't really realize that there was anything about my life other than what I had always remembered. There was always a lot going on in my brain, and I was easily distracted.
Right.
And, but except when I'm listening to someone, and I'm hyper-focused when I'm listening to someone. So I think that this thing about listening and asking questions was, and you're the first person who asked a question that I've seen this, is that I think that I naturally went to that activity because it was the only activity where I really felt continually focused. And as long as I was in a conversation and I was listening to a person's story and I could ask them questions, my mind wasn't going in all sorts of directions. I was really focused on the story that the person was telling me. So maybe I did that out of sort of a self-therapy, that I found an activity
that suited your
where I
symptoms.
didn't feel all over the place. I didn't feel
Right.
disrupting myself and not following through and everything else. And I'm just seeing it for the first time as you're asking me the question.
Yeah. So so it sounds like the conversations are interesting. They're novel because it's not always the same one. And in the
Well,
way you
and
like to help
I'm
people.
seeing I'm visualizing what the
Right.
person is. I'm almost like I'm seeing their experience as a movie. You know.
Oh, interesting. So you're a visual thinker.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then at the same time, it's challenging because you like to help and find new solutions and options for them. So,
I like being useful.
oh, very much so. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so then with that being interested, so how are you with your day-to-day stuff in your early stages of your company?
Sloppy, erratic, um, keeping my bank account in my head.
Trying to juggle a lot of stuff.
Yeah, always having last minute. If you know, it required me to do because I was an artist and writer. I had been
Right.
with an ad agency, so you know, you can tell a great story how you just decided to be a coach and you did, but what you really decided to do was make sure that you paid the bills every month. And you know, yeah, I had artwork to do. I mean, I did odd jobs, you know, just to make sure the rent was paid and
Yeah.
everything else. And it was always a last minute, you know, working all night or, rush. I always last minute. And then, this crises of a last minute deadline and everything else actually hyper focuses me because I go in, you
Yeah.
just don't have any time except the time that's left to actually get it done. And therefore you can't get distracted, but it always exhausts you afterwards.
Oh,
So
it's extremely fatiguing. So you're just getting that adrenaline rush to get going and get the brain
yeah,
activated with
yeah.
the
You're
pressure.
scary. I mean, you're
Yeah.
in a state of fear, and it
So,
feels good.
so yeah, but then you crash hard,
Nothing
which
like
is not
scaring
fun.
yourself. Nothing like that. Being scared of
Yeah.
yourself. You know.
So I don't know if the listeners heard the difference in Dan's tone there when he was talking about when he was coaching people and he was interested. You can just tell in his voice some sort of passion and energizing. And then when I asked him about the day-to-day business stuff, the tone just went away. It was almost painful to talk about. And I think a lot of us can relate to that very much. So if you're feeling that pain, I think it's something you've got to look at. So, all right. So with that, challenges, and then you met Babs and you guys created Strategic Coach. Now, what is the big game changer with Strategic Coach versus your one-on-one coaching experience?
Yeah, there was actually a bridge in there, and Babs is one of the bridges because Babs has been amazing at identifying areas of activity that I just shouldn't be doing, and literally starting around 1985, 86. I met her in 82, and Babs had her own business, and but I had created a thinking tool from my first 8 years of coaching, which was called the Strategy Circle, which is still a mainstay in Strategic Coach. And after I'd done about let's say 50 or 60 clients where I just got paid to ask them questions and sort of diagram what their plans looked like. And I had developed a certain methodology. And after a while, I began to see that um, all entrepreneurs are 20% unique, but they're 80% the same. There's an 80% the same, and their future is about creating goals for the future that they feel very emotionally connected to, but then they have obstacles that come up that prevent them. And I developed a technique where I could get them to say, a point in the future, let's say it's 2 years from today, and you put the date, what 5 things are going to be true that really represent big jumps for you?
Yep.
And it could be personal life, business life, and we'd have 5 of them. And I'd say, okay, now where you are right now, what's everything that doesn't work? What's an obstacle? we do. And I'd write down obstacles, and then we take a break. And then I'd say, okay, let's take each obstacle. And is there a decision you can make? Communication, somebody you can communicate with? Is there an action you can take? And we'd create a set of strategies. And that would be good for a 3-month period, that they would do this and they'd move everything forward. And I got paid up front for the month. I got up for most of them, would say, to get started, I'm going to charge you, $1,000. This is 1982 dollars, so a lot more than right now. And then we'll check up in 3 months. We'll come back and we'll check up on all the progress. And we get their team members, sometimes a personal assistant involved. So,
Yeah.
They would take overview responsibility to remind the entrepreneur of that. And we come back, and it became very successful. And people referred me, and they said, you got to spend time with this guy. He really gets you clear. And so it was very successful. And for the first time, because I had a single method, kept me focused, And the other thing was, I didn't have to do anything as a result of these meetings. I simply had to be asking them the questions and recording them. And I created a form, which is very similar to the form that's still in the workshop. So all I would do is fill in the form, and then I'd go to a blueprint shop and I'd just get copies of it and give them the original, and then I would have copies. And it was very simple. I didn't have to know anything about their business before I sat down.
Right.
And I didn't have any follow through. So that got me out of the deadline problem and delivering on my own. So this was a great solution.
Do you think that was a conscious effort or cognitive effort to do that, or it just kind of flowed with your experience?
I think it flowed out of my experience, that I was treating it as if it was 50 different stories, but it was actually 80. It was the same story, and they had individual unique things that were, but that could be reflected in their goals and their obstacles and everything. And I got, it was very viable business. And so, I had been making like 20,000 a year before I got this tool. And within about 6 years, I was up to about 150,000 a year. So it was a big jump. And meanwhile, Babs, starting around 85, had said, I'm finished with my business. She was in the nutrition business, and she was a very high-level massage therapist for people like stuntmen out of the movies, or airline crews, ballet dancers who just do horrible damage to their bodies. You're not supposed to go through life standing on your toes. It's not a, it's not natural. And they have all sorts of structural problems, and everything. And Babs is really great at it. And she was good at nutrition. She's very health conscious. She's always, my health today is a testimony to the impact that and the influence that Babs has had. And then she said, well, look, I'm just going to create an organization around you. This is a great thing you're doing. And she said, I think this is going to be really big. And so, but you were selling time, and I had to get away from selling time, one-on-one time.
Right.
So we said, I think we can do this in a group setting, and we'll have each person do a strategy circle, and we'll have them talk to each other about their goals. Not too different from what we're doing, in the workshops today. They'd have breakout groups. If you had 12 people, you'd have 4 breakout groups. And then it just grew, and Babs just kept getting the organization. So I would say that from the moment that she decided to be my partner, and she was going to be the person who created the organization around me, so I could, I could be front stage.
So all the stuff you did not like to do, she ended up doing for you.
Yeah. And the whole organization is, you don't have Dan doing anything except what we get paid for and what he loves doing. That's sort of her 2 roles.
Yeah. And I think that's very important for the listeners to understand, is that, the way coaches, you're term is compatible team members. And you guys are very structured on who does what, and it's all has to do with what they do best. And
Yeah.
people who don't do those parts best stay out.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
And, and what was true of me, we applied to everyone else. Dan is great at certain things. Don't have him doing things he's not great at. But then when you brought in a team member, they would have to be hired for a particular job that just needed getting done.
yeah.
But we have a commitment, which we've been 100% consistent on following through, that we're going to work with you and find out what part of the work that you actually love doing, and more will free you up so that you can just do what you love doing. And Ned Hollowell, who I have been in contact, and Ned, of course, is
Yeah, Dr. Hollowell. Yep.
yeah, very, very
Distraction.
famous, very well-known doctor, and specializing in ADD. And he came and sat in on a couple of workshops when we were 15 years old, and he said, I don't know if you've studied ADD, but he said these sheets that you do and the procedure, he said, this is perfect for ADD people. He says, they only have to fill in a little box. They got 30 seconds to fill it in. He says, you've just relieved all the stress of thinking. I mean, and and they get to talk about their experience, and the entire day is about them. It's not about abstract things they have to learn and everything. And he said, I don't know, but he said, I think you have perhaps the best remedial program for ADD people that I've ever seen.
Yeah, like, and for me, that out loud talking is actually very important for the ADHD brain. The only way we can think and process things is actually talking out loud. And that's I read, to me, the biggest benefit I have, the payday, is actually on those breakout sessions and the conversations in between. Is it fair to say the way Strategic Coach has been structured around you, it was, in a way, it was created to manage your undiagnosed symptoms?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. So, yeah, that's what I went to the Amen Clinic. That's where I was actually diagnosed, and they're all over the U.S. now. I think they have 6 or 7, and and I went because I was aware. I mean, there's clients who are far more ADD than I am. A lot of them are ADD, and they can't listen. Their mind is on two things. I'm a really great listener. I mean, when I'm listening, none of that's going on. None of that stuff's going in my mind. So for whatever reason, that particular activity really suited me, and I've built an entire discipline around it, and we've built an entire company around it. But I had heard about the Amen Clinic, and that they would do 3 days of testing, and they would brain test you, and for memory, for concentration, for responsiveness, and so I just well, I'm just going to do it so I get a handle, so I can be more helpful.
Yep.
And I probably was the primary referral source for probably 60 or 70 people who've gone to Amen, or they've gone to Ned Hollowell.
Yeah.
Ned's more of a consulting type of thing, but I mean, the Amen Clinic's like a factory. They have a lot of people going through. A lot of them is blue collar. They have a lot of blue collar people who are around toxic chemicals, and they come from ADD is a very inheritable. I think it's of psychological traits. I think it's the second most inheritable. When I look at my mother and father, it's very clear to me that they were both.
It can't skip a generation, but it's definitely, you could always go back to, like, some people say, well, yeah, I remember that uncle or that aunt or my parents are very much so.
Yeah. So anyway, I went, and the psychiatrist at the end wraps up the 3 days of testing. She said, they ask you a lot of questions about what your life is like, and I had to tell a story. Very organized, very calm. lots of order, lots of structure. And then I get in the testing, and there's a 10-ring circuits going on inside my brain. And that she said, what accounts for the radical difference between the way you say you experience your life and what our tests say? And so we got into what we do for a living. And she said, well, I don't know who else you do this for, but you sure created this program for yourself.
Yeah. And that has to do, basically, the focus is the unique ability of the person. Try to work only in your unique ability and have everyone else find a who that, if you got to figure out how to do it, that means someone else can do it for you. That's a who. And to try and just structure so that's protected, like your time is protected by quite a few people. People set up the stage for you. And then, even figuring out how to, writing your books, you don't write pen to paper.
I don't write the books.
You get interviewed, you figured out the best way that works for you. You're a storyteller, so you just audibly tell the story and then it gets written by someone else.
Yeah.
So
can I share something? I had a friend who was elected to Parliament in Canada. Okay. And he was immediately appointed. The Liberals were in power. That was the first Trudeau, the father was there. And then it was 1980, and it was the year of the disabled and the handicapped worldwide. It was a big United Nations thing. And so Canada decided to update all the legislations, regulations, and approaches to a wide assortment of disabilities across Canada, so that you could get people into the educational system a lot easier. You could get them into skills training. You could get them into jobs, and like curb cuts and bathrooms that lots of things which, if you build them in at the beginning, don't cost that much. It's the retrofitting that costs a lot. So anyway, I had worked on the political campaign as a writer for this man, and he was grateful for it. And he said, we're going to need to issue a report. And he said, I think you have the ability to do that. So I actually designed the report. I wrote the report. But what I did is I interviewed 40 different kinds of disabled people across Canada. Some of it was physical. There was blindness. There was people who were deaf. Multiple sclerosis. Everything that would come under the category of that government assistance could help. And I was flying back and forth across Canada a couple of times because we'd have a photographer, and the photographer would, just do still shots. And then in the report, we had a big section where we showed the photographs and we gave interview copy, and it was hard to tell they were disabled. They were intelligent. Some of them visibly you could tell that they were disabled, but most of them you couldn't. And so this thought came to me. So this is 1980, 81. And I said, they're just visibly more disabled. But I said, there's lots of areas in my life where you might as well call me disabled. Anything that relates follow through, detailed follow through, anything following things systematically, I'm totally disabled.
Yeah.
And that's where I got the idea that there's an area that's a sweet spot for everybody where you just grade. Right. But outside of that circle, let's say your unique ability is inside of a circle, and everything outside of that, you're functionally disabled because you can't follow through. You can't do this systematically. Nobody could depend upon you to do these activities.
Because that creates frustrations, annoyance, learning how to do something. And if you don't do it frequently or care for it, it's even harder to do.
And you hate the work. You hate the work.
And then with our brains, it's even harder to get into something we don't like and not interested.
Yeah. And I said, we're all disabled. Yeah. There are just things where if you're required to do this. And it was so funny. Last night I was doing 2-hour one of the connector workshops with the free zone people. And I have people, just brainstorm. I said, okay, we're going to think about this experience. I just want you to brainstorm, things that you're doing. And at the end, people said, I really love the brainstorming. And I said, oh, you got to be really careful with brainstorming. I said, you really have to check out people's Colby. And and I said, if they have, like Eleonora here, she's a 7 follow through. For Eleonora, there is no such thing as brainstorming. Everything that gets said goes down on a list, and she has to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's interesting because you could just wear out a follow. If you or I just brainstorm in front of a follow through for 3 or 4 straight days, they'd have to take sick leave for 2 or 3 days just to recover from the strain.
2 or 3 weeks at times.
2 or 3 strain, So Shannon Waller, who you know.
Yep.
So Shannon.
She's been on the podcast too. Yep.
Shannon and Babs and Shannon's husband. So here's our combined Colbys. So we have a total of 10 fact finder among the 4 of us.
Oh, wow.
We have 9 follow through. We have 38 quick start, and we have 15 implementer. Yeah. Okay. So we can sit and talk for hours, and this is exciting. And the world is absolutely safe that anything will happen out of our 2 or 3 hours. Yeah. We're just talking.
Lots of great ideas and futuristic thinking, and then it goes nowhere.
But there's not there's absolutely no danger. The world is absolutely safe from anything that we planned. It will not happen.
There's no follow throughs with it.
Because we have absolutely no follow through.
So you've structured strategic coach to work where you can work with your unique ability frequently, and you got the team around you
all the time.
So even though you have all that structure around you, do you still have challenges with your ADHD symptoms? Do you find?
No, not very much.
No.
I mean, we have continual reviews. Is there something that irritates you? And I bring it up, and we'll say, okay, we'll find somebody who can do that. So it's a constant, and as you go deeper, things that might not have annoyed you 2 years ago, they're starting to annoy you. And so, except for coaching, which I love, and I'm very focused when I'm coaching, and podcasts, which I love doing, I'm very focused, and doing the tools to create a new project, and the main ones are books. I have about a half hour to get it done, and then I start getting irritated. This is taking too long. Right. It's taking too long. So I have to do very, very rapid outlines, and then it goes to Shannon or somebody else, and they interview me on my outline, and then it goes to a writer, and we have artists and everything like that. So my whole point is, from one quarter to the next, I am less involved in things that irritate me.
Yeah. So, but from what you're also saying, if you let it go too long, the symptoms do start to affect you. So by knowing that, so they're still there, but it's under better control with the structure you have.
Yeah, but I keep striving. There's a study. I don't think I'll ever reach a point where don't come across something that just annoys me. Right. And I don't try to unannoy something that annoys me. I just get rid of it.
Yes, that was a really good lesson. That was a good session for me. I learned a lot with what's bothering you, and just get rid of it. So what's your next big project that you're working on, your next success projects? I ask people as they're on. What's your big thing?
Well, this is very timely because I just identified 5 really big ones. In some cases, some of these would take a couple of years. But one of them is, we're at a point where and the uncertainty work of all the tools that we've created in 33 years, this is absolutely the best tool. I mean, this is just, I agree. And so I'm talking to my IP lawyer. He's in Silicon Valley, and he's he's just top of his game. And I said, can we establish a patent for the, because patents are the nuclear weapons of the IP world. When you have a patent, it's heavy business. That we could create a master patent of the certainty uncertainty tool, and then every other tool is related to that patent, but it's covered by copyrights and trademarks and everything else. And I'm very excited about that because we, for the first time in our life, spent 2 years going through a litigation where somebody was stealing our stuff and wouldn't stop doing it. So we sued and we won, but it's an expensive, it's an expensive victory. And I said, I was happy to go through the experience, and I'll be even more happy never to go through the experience again. And so I'm, as you know, from the workshops, I've gotten very, very serious about intellectual property protection. And, and there's others like the creation of the new lifetime extender program, which opens, we have 122 signed up,
That's
so
the longevity.
Longevity,
Longevity.
Age reversal and longevity, and that's been,
that's been
from a dead start, we have 125 people in it. So
I know there's a lot of people excited about that. And there's a lot to take away from that.
Yeah.
Well, I know the listeners could see and appreciate that Dan is definitely a storyteller. We can go on for hours storytelling here, but unfortunately, I have to cut this in a pain.
Well, storytellers are good for ADD people.
Yes.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that I've listened to a lot of stories, so I know a good story when I hear one, and I've tried to, to improve my own ability to do that.
Yes, and that's very good. Now let's create your own story, listener, and take these 3 things into consideration. Create a structure around you with the right people that can support your unique ability, which also means find your unique ability and stick to it as much as you can. And also identify what bothers you and just get rid of it. Dan, thank you very much for taking the time and sharing your story. And I appreciate any opportunity to sit down and talk.
André, I love talking about this topic because we're fellow travelers.
We're like-brained.
We're like-brained. And, I think people are unique in how they come to grips with it, but there's a lot that's in common that works for everybody. Yeah.
And thank you to the listener for listening. If you like what you heard today, subscribe to the podcast. And please, if you heard what you heard was beneficial, please share this with 2 or 3 friends. And you can also leave us a rating and comments. And I want to hear from you and see what resonated with you about the conversation with Dan. You can email me at questions@theimpulsivethinker.com or at the website. Thanks again, Dan, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, André.